Princess Liara of Zoreth sat by the large window of her palace room, gazing out at the sprawling city below. Zoreth, a planet known for its lush forests, towering mountains, and shining lakes, seemed peaceful. Its citizens were intelligent and capable, with a long history of harmony between species. Yet today, a sense of unease lingered in the air. The news that had reached the royal palace was like a storm, sudden and overwhelming. Liara had been called to meet someone she had never imagined she would encounter, a human from Earth. For as long as Liara could remember, she had been told stories about Earth. She had heard about its beautiful landscapes, its vibrant cultures, and its history filled with both wonder and tragedy. Humans, in particular, were known across the galaxy for their determination and resilience. But they were also known for their violent pasts and short lifespans. Many species saw them as too unpredictable, too full of conflict. Zorath, a planet that had long embraced peace, had no need for such turmoil. That is, until the Intergalactic Council decreed that Liara must marry a human. Liara's mother, Queen Elira, had informed her of the decision with a heavy heart. The Council was a powerful organization, made up of many different species from across the galaxy. Their decisions affected the balance of power in the universe, and this marriage was meant to secure an alliance between Zorath and Earth. It was not a choice, it was a command. Liara understood the importance of diplomacy and peace. She had been raised to do her duty to the planet and its people. The unity of the galaxy depended on cooperation between the various species. She knew that her marriage to this human was the key to Zorath's future peace. However, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The decision had been made for her. She had no say in it. It didn't matter that she was the crown princess, destined to lead her people one day. This was not a matter of choice. The alliance with Earth was necessary, and so Liara had accepted the reality, even if it made her heart ache. As the day of her meeting with the human ambassador drew nearer, Liara found herself growing more anxious. She had heard little about him, only that he was a representative from Earth. His name was Mark, and he was said to be intelligent, driven, and capable. But none of those descriptions could erase the fear that churned within her. How could she marry someone she had never met? How could she, a princess who had known only peace, be forced into a union with someone from a planet known for its wars and conflicts? Her mother, Queen Elira, was kind but firm. "This is your duty, my daughter," she had said one evening as they sat together in the royal gardens. "You are the future of Zorath. Your marriage is not about you alone, but about the future of our people. I know this is difficult, but you must put aside your feelings for the good of all." Liara had nodded, but inside she felt as though she were drowning in her emotions. She had never been one to shy away from responsibility. She had been trained to lead, to make tough decisions for the good of her people. But this was different. This was personal. Days passed, and the time for her to meet Mark drew closer. The palace buzzed with activity as preparations were made for the meeting. The grand hall was decorated with flowers from Zorath's most sacred gardens, and the finest food from all over the planet was arranged in beautiful displays. Liara's royal attire, a gown of shimmering silver fabric, was carefully fitted to ensure she looked the part of the princess. But no matter how much attention was given to the details, nothing could calm the storm inside her. She had always been taught that love and duty were separate, that her role as a princess came before her personal feelings. Yet, the idea of marrying someone she did not know, someone she had not chosen, was a difficult pill to swallow. She had spent years watching her people, listening to their needs and understanding their hopes for the future. Yet here she was, being asked to marry a stranger for a cause she didn't fully understand. Was this really the best way to unite the galaxy? On the day of the meeting, Liara woke early, unable to sleep through the restless night. She stared at the ceiling, her thoughts swirling in every direction. The palace was quiet. the only sounds the soft chirping of birds outside her window and the distant hum of machinery. She rose from her bed and walked to the balcony, her eyes falling on the gardens below. The flowers, brilliant in color and scent, seemed to mock her inner turmoil. Why did things have to be this way? Why couldn't she choose her own path? Why couldn't her marriage be based on love, on mutual understanding, on something real? The more she thought about it, the more the weight of the decision pressed on her chest. How could she go through with this? As she prepared for the meeting, Liara's mind was full of questions. Would she like this human? Would he be as she imagined, rough, unpredictable, and difficult to understand? Or would he be different, someone who could see the galaxy as she did, someone who could understand her? Could they truly build something meaningful together, or was this union doomed to fail from the start? The day arrived, and Liara stood before the palace doors, waiting to greet the human ambassador. Her heart raced, her hands trembling slightly as she smoothed the fabric of her gown. The grand hall was filled with dignitaries and officials from all corners of the galaxy, but Liara felt alone in the crowd. She was the center of attention, the one everyone was waiting for. But for all the eyes on her, she felt nothing but fear and doubt. Finally, the doors opened, and in walked Mark. Liara had seen human faces before, portraits, holograms, and statues, but none of those images prepared her for the man who now stood before her. Mark was tall, with dark hair and eyes that seemed to hold a depth of emotion she had never expected. He was not the crude, primitive being she had imagined. His expression was calm, and there was something in his gaze that made Liara feel uneasy, as though he could see straight through her. When their eyes met, Liara felt a shock wave run through her. There was a warmth in his gaze, a kindness that she had not anticipated. It was a feeling she had never experienced before, an odd mix of curiosity and something more. But no words came to her lips. She was frozen, unable to speak, caught in the moment of meeting someone who had been thrust into her life by fate, but who she now saw in a completely different light. Mark, noticing her silence, stepped forward with a gentle smile. He bowed slightly, his eyes still locked with hers. "Princess Liara," he said, his voice deep and warm, "it is an honor to finally meet you." Liara wanted to speak, to greet him as tradition dictated, but the words caught in her throat. How could she greet him when everything she thought she knew about this moment was being turned upside down? For a long moment, the room was silent. Liara stood still, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never felt so unsure of herself. She had been trained to lead, to make decisions without hesitation. But now, in front of this human, she was paralyzed. She couldn't speak. She couldn't move. All she could do was look into his eyes, wondering what her future would hold. The meeting was awkward from the start. Liara could feel the weight of the room on her shoulders, the eyes of the other dignitaries watching closely. She had been trained for moments like this, moments when she would be the center of attention, when the fate of her people rested in her hands. But this was different. This was personal, and for the first time in her life, Liara wasn't sure how to navigate it. Mark stood before her, his eyes never leaving hers. The silence stretched on, thick and heavy, like a storm cloud ready to burst. Liara knew she had to say something. She was the princess of Zorath. She couldn't be frozen in the moment, unable to speak. Yet no words came to her. Her mind raced, trying to find the right thing to say, but everything felt inadequate. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Mark broke the silence. His voice was calm, steady. "I understand this may not be easy for you, princess," he said, his tone sincere. "This whole situation is unexpected, I'm sure, but I'm here to make this work however I can." Liara's heart skipped a beat. There was no anger in his voice, no bitterness, just understanding. For a moment she was taken aback. Could it really be that simple? Could a human, someone she had been taught to see as primitive, violent, be this? Compassionate. She took a deep breath and nodded, still unsure of herself. "I thank you," she managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. It wasn't much, but it was all she could manage at that moment. The room seemed to exhale as Mark smiled warmly, clearly relieved that she had spoken. He straightened, still watching her closely. "I know this is difficult," he said, his eyes full of empathy. "I'm not here to force you into anything. I just want you to know that I'm open to getting to know you, to making this work for both of us." His words were so simple, yet they hit Liara in a way she hadn't expected. She had spent so many years preparing for this moment, training to be the leader Zorath needed, but nothing could have prepared her for the human in front of her. His openness, his willingness to understand her, made her question everything she had been taught. Liara glanced around the room, feeling the eyes of the other officials on her. She couldn't escape the pressure of their expectations, but for a moment she wished she could. She wanted to retreat to a place where she could think clearly, where she could sort through the confusion inside her. But that wasn't possible. She was the princess. She had a duty to her people, to Zorath, and whether she liked it or not, Mark was now a part of that future. The silence between them was still uncomfortable, but now it was filled with uncertainty. Liara found herself studying Mark more closely. His dark hair fell across his forehead in a way that seemed casual, yet confident. His eyes were deep, a mixture of curiosity and something else, something Liara couldn't quite place. Despite herself, she felt drawn to him. This human, whom she had been taught to fear and distrust, was showing her a side of himself that she hadn't expected, and it confused her. Mark shifted slightly, his hands resting at his sides. "I know you've been told a lot about Earth," he said, breaking her train of thought. "About humans. But I want to be clear about something. Not all of us are the same. We come from a planet that has had its share of struggles, yes, but we're also capable of kindness, of understanding. I don't want you to think that this is just a political arrangement for me." Liara looked at him, feeling something stir inside her. He wasn't just saying the words to convince her. There was sincerity in his eyes, a depth to his voice that made her question everything she thought she knew. Could it be true? Could a human really understand peace the way her people did? She had heard stories about the violent past of Earth, about the wars and destruction that had shaped their history. But Mark didn't look like the stories she had been told. He didn't seem violent or unstable. He seemed calm, grounded, even kind. It was a difficult thing for Liara to reconcile with the image she had grown up with. As the minutes passed, she realized that Mark was not what she had expected at all. He wasn't a savage. He wasn't here to conquer or destroy. He was here to build something. And despite herself, Liara couldn't help but feel a small spark of hope. Could they actually make this work? Could a Zorathian princess and a human ambassador find common ground despite their differences? The conversation drifted from politics to more personal topics, and Mark asked Liara about her life on Zorath. She found herself opening up, sharing things she had never expected to share with a stranger. She told him about her childhood, about the lessons her mother had taught her, about her training to become the next queen. Mark listened intently, his expression thoughtful as she spoke. "You've had a lot of responsibility placed on your shoulders," Mark said after a long pause. "That must be a lot to carry," Liara nodded, surprised by the empathy in his words. "It's always been my duty, to my people, to Zorath. I've been raised to put them first, to put myself second." She paused, realizing how much of her life had been dictated by duty. "But sometimes it feels like I've lost myself in all of that." Mark's expression softened. "I can't pretend to understand what that feels like," he said gently. "But I know what it's like to have to live up to expectations. It's not easy. But the most important thing is that you don't forget who you are. You're not just a princess. You're a person." Liara was silent for a moment, the weight of his words sinking in. She had never really thought about it that way. She had always seen herself as a princess, as a symbol of Zorath's future. But Mark was reminding her that she was more than that. She was a person with her own feelings, her own desires, her own dreams. And for the first time, she wondered if she had been too focused on her duty to truly live. She shook her head, trying to clear her thoughts. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do anymore," she confessed, her voice barely audible. "I don't know if I can marry you or anyone for that matter. This whole thing feels like it's happening to someone else. I don't even know who I am in all of this." Mark reached out, gently taking her hand in his. Liara's heart skipped a beat at the touch, but she didn't pull away. "You don't have to decide right now," he said softly. "You don't have to figure everything out in one day. Take your time. I'm not going anywhere." For the first time in what felt like forever, Liara allowed herself to relax. Maybe this wasn't going to be as difficult as she had feared. Maybe she could learn to trust him, to see what kind of future they could build together. It was still too soon to tell, but in that moment, she realized that the future was no longer as uncertain as it had seemed. As the day drew to a close, Liara and Mark said their goodbyes. She could see the sincerity in his eyes as he walked away, leaving her with a heart full of emotions she didn't fully understand. The road ahead was still unclear, but for the first time, Liara wasn't afraid of it. Days passed, and with each one, the weight of the situation seemed to settle deeper into Liara's heart. She had always known that duty came before everything else. As a princess, she had been trained to think of her people first, to make sacrifices for the greater good. The alliance between Zorath and Earth was of paramount importance, and her marriage to Mark was supposed to be the cornerstone of that alliance. But the more time she spent with him, the more complicated her feelings became. He was nothing like what she had expected. Mark was kind, thoughtful, and respectful. He didn't push her, didn't pressure her into making decisions before she was ready. Instead, he gave her space to think, to make her own choices. And that was what made it so difficult. She had spent her whole life obeying the orders of others, doing what was expected of her. But now, faced with the possibility of a life with a human, she found herself questioning everything she had ever believed about duty, love, and choice. There were moments, small moments, when Liara caught herself smiling in Mark's presence. She noticed how his eyes seemed to light up when she spoke about her planet's history, how he genuinely cared about understanding Zorath's culture. They had talked about everything from the customs of her people to the stars that filled their sky, and with each conversation, Liara found herself drawn to him more and more. But even as she felt this connection, the weight of her duty to her people hung over her like a dark cloud. One evening, as the two of them walked through the royal gardens, the soft glow of the twin moons illuminating the path before them, Mark spoke again of the future. "I know it's not easy," he said, his voice gentle as if he could sense the conflict within her. "But I want you to know that I'm not here to take anything from you. I'm here to be with you however that looks, whether that's as partners or just as friends. I don't want you to feel pressured." Liara stopped walking, looking up at the stars above. She could feel the cool breeze against her skin, but it did little to cool the fire that burned within her. For the first time, she realized just how much she wanted to make her own choice, not just for herself, but for Zorath as well. If she was going to lead her people, she couldn't do it by following orders. She had to be true to herself. "I've spent my whole life doing what others expect of me," Liara said, her voice shaky. "I've always been told what to do, what my future would be, but now I have to make a choice, and I don't know if I'm ready." Mark stepped closer, his presence calming. "You don't have to make a choice today. Take your time, Liara. I'm not going anywhere." His words were exactly what she needed to hear. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she was being forced into a decision. She felt like she had the freedom to choose her own path, even if that path was uncertain. As the days turned into weeks, Liara found herself spending more time with Mark. They continued to explore Zorath together, visiting the sacred temples, walking along the rivers that ran through the planet's many valleys, and even attending official events where they had to present themselves as an engaged couple. But despite the public appearances, The two of them had formed a bond that went beyond politics. They began to share their hopes, their dreams, their fears. Liara had never thought much about what she wanted for herself. She had always been so focused on the future of her planet, on the role she would play as the future queen, that she never took the time to think about what she needed to be happy. But now, in Mark's presence, she realized how much she had sacrificed. She had given up her chance at a personal life, her chance at love, for the sake of her people, and she had never questioned it until now. One afternoon, as they sat by the lake near the palace, Liara finally spoke her mind. "I've spent my whole life being prepared for a role, for a future that was decided for me. I've never had the chance to decide what I want for myself, but now, I'm not so sure I want to follow the path that was set for me." Mark turned to her, his gaze gentle but firm. "You don't have to follow that path, Liara. You're the one who gets to decide what happens next, whether that's with me or without me. I'm here because I care about you, but I want you to be happy first and foremost." The sincerity in his words made Liara's heart ache. She had never heard anyone speak to her like this. All her life, people had spoken to her as if she were a symbol, as if she were a tool to be used for the greater good. But Mark saw her as a person, as someone with her own desires and dreams, and that made all the difference. For the first time in weeks, Liara allowed herself to relax. She had spent so much time worrying about the future, about what was expected of her, that she had forgotten what it felt like to just live in the moment. With Mark, she could be herself. She could laugh, she could cry, and she could dream without the pressure of duty weighing on her shoulders. As the days passed, Liara began to feel a shift inside her. She was no longer just the princess of Zorath, bound by duty and tradition. She was Liara, a person with her own feelings, her own desires, and her own future to shape. And for the first time, she was willing to fight for that future. The time for the wedding was fast approaching. The council had made it clear that the marriage must take place soon, and the political pressures were mounting. But Liara no longer felt the urgency that had once consumed her. She had taken control of her own life, and she was no longer afraid to make her own decisions. One evening, as she stood on the balcony of the palace, looking out over the city, Liara made up her mind. She was going to choose her own path, even if it meant breaking from tradition. She was going to marry Mark, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. She had come to realize that the future of Zorath didn't depend on her sacrificing her own happiness. It depended on her being true to herself, to her heart. When Mark came to visit her that evening, Liara took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "Mark," she said, her voice steady but full of emotion, "I've made my decision. I want to marry you." Mark's eyes lit up with surprise and joy. "Are you sure? You don't have to do this for me, Liara. You don't have to do anything for anyone but yourself." Liara nodded, her heart swelling with happiness. "I'm doing this for me, Mark. I'm doing this because I believe in us, in what we can build together. I don't want to live my life for others anymore. I want to live it for myself." In that moment, the weight that had been pressing down on Liara for so long lifted. She had made her choice, and for the first time she felt truly free. As Mark took her hand in his, Liara knew that the future would not be easy. There would be challenges, obstacles, and pressure from all sides, but she was no longer afraid. She had found the courage to live her own life, to make her own choices. And with Mark by her side, she knew that together, they could face anything that came their way. And so, as the twin moons rose high above the horizon, Liara smiled, ready to embrace whatever the future held. She had chosen love, and in doing so, she had chosen herself.